We thank you for being here this morning and welcome to the Reading Discovery Program sponsored by the Barbara Bush Literacy Corps and the Barbara Bush Foundation for Family Literacy. I'll be your moderator today. My name is Mike Wright. I'm the General Manager of KBTX TV and KBTX Media. The program is made possible by the George Bush Presidential Library's Education Department, and it has a twofold purpose of sharing the joy of reading among all ages and highlighting effective, confidence-building approaches to becoming a better reader. For instance, using a reading buddy or maybe singing are two universal helpful ways to expand your language ability in any language you're learning. Your reading buddy could be your grandparent, your parent, or your friend. Now, altogether, there are over 11,000 participants engaged in this video conference across the state of Texas. We appreciate greatly the help of Lori Aiden and Barbara Solo of the Distance Learning Team at the Education Service Center of Region 6, located nearby in Huntsville. Today's Reading Discovery program will feature story time with Mrs. Bush. She will read from the Parents' Choice Gold Award-winning book, Wackiest White House Pets, written by Gibbs Davis. After 64 years of marriage to George Herbert Walker Bush, Barbara Bush still considers herself the luckiest woman in the world to have shared her life with the former president. Her #1 family cause is family literacy. The Barbara Bush Foundation for Family Literacy helps to aid and promote literacy by giving grants to family literacy projects around the country. Mrs. Bush has written 4 books. She wrote See Fred's Story and the best-selling Millie's book, with profits benefiting the literacy cause. She's written a best-selling autobiography, Barbara Bush, a memoir. Her most recent best-selling book is Reflections. It documents her life after the White House. Accompanied by author Gibbs Davis, please join me in welcoming former First Lady Barbara Bush. Mrs. Bush, we thank you for your dedication to literacy and to the children like these throughout the world and this morning that have joined us here throughout the state of Texas, joining us by the video conference as well during this special teleconference. Now, please feel free to read selections from the award-winning book, Wackiest White House Pets.
I certainly will, and I'm delighted to see so many wonderful-looking young men and women. Maybe boys and girls. But you're going to be young men and women very shortly. I thought it'd be fun. Everybody had the funniest dogs. But I thought I would read The Tiniest Dog first. Franklin Pierce, who was a cousin of mine, 6 times removed. But Franklin Pierce didn't really want to be president. His friends nominated him. Tragedy followed him into the White House. Just before his inauguration, his 3rd son died in a railroad accident. It was a most difficult time for our country, too. Everyone was arguing about slavery. Tensions between the North and the South were increasing. And by the end of Franklin Pierce's term, the nation was hurtling towards a civil war. Perhaps the president took some small comfort in his pocket-sized pet. 2 tiny slave dogs had sailed all the way from the Orient to America on Commodore Matthew Perry's flotilla. The U.S. had just opened trade with Japan. Perry had brought lots of other presents from Japan, but the president had only eyes for the diminutive dogs. It was easy to see why. One of the dogs stayed on at the White House, but Pierce gave the others to Jefferson Davis. Davis would later become the president of the Confederacy. His new dog, named Bonin, was so tiny he could sit in a saucer. With a head the size of a bird's and large popped eyes, the bite-sized pup traveled in style through Washington's high society, tucked into Davis's pocket. That's the tiniest dog. let's see, the biggest ears it's called. President James Buchanan was too old and cautious to make hard decisions. I should tell you that my cousin, Franklin Pierce, I was so excited when I was younger and looked it up. He was considered the worst president in the United States.
Oh,
Ooh. So I didn't tell people when I was young that he was
No.
a cousin 6 times removed. The nation was divided over slavery, and Buchanan refused to take sides. 7 southern states ended up leaving the Union. They set up their own Confederate States of America. Buchanan was the only president never to marry. His married friends were worried that the bachelor president might be lonely in the White House, so they were always sending him animals to keep him company. The King of Siam presented Buchanan with a herd of elephants. They were the first White House pets to arrive with their own trunks. That's supposed to be a joke, I guess. However, some animals were too big to live in the White House, so the president wisely decided to donate them to the local zoo. After all, elephants are the symbol of the Republican Party, and Buchanan was a Democrat. One of the president's friends decided to send him a more patriotic pet, a pair of bald eagles. This majestic bird is on the presidential seal. However, they were sent to live at Wheatland, President Buchanan's Pennsylvania home. By day, the disappointed eagles walked the grounds, and at night they slept in twin cages on the back porch. Buchanan owned one of the biggest dogs ever to live in the White House, a Newfoundland named Laura. At 170 pounds, the huge Newfie looked more like a bear than a dog. Laura became famous in Washington for her ability to lie still for hours, one eye opened and one eye closed. The president and Laura must have made an interesting pair. Buchanan was nearsighted in one eye and farsighted in the other, and he made up for it by always cocking his head to the left. That's a funny picture, I must say. The next one I wanted to read was the biggest menagerie.
menagerie.
See, I had to have someone come tell me how to pronounce
We
that.
have to be reading buddies. We can help each other.
I needed that. President Theodore Roosevelt charged into the 20th century. He was the first president to fly in an airplane, ride in a car, and submerge in a submarine. But this robust president never lost his love for nature. He saved millions of acres of wildness. However, no place was more full of wildlife than the president's own house. Theodore Roosevelt had more than 40 pets. His teenage daughter, Alice, wanted an attention-getting pet. Her garter snake was named Emily Spinach because it was as green as spinach and as thin as Alice's Aunt Emily. Alice loved attending elegant parties with Emily Spinach. She would wait for a quiet moment, crack open her purse, let Emily slither out. The president's daughter would laugh as she watched the ladies rush for the door, screaming. Emily wasn't the only Roosevelt who liked snakes. Once her brother Quentin barged into the Oval Office with a bag full of squirming snakes. When he dropped them into the table to hug his father, chaos broke out. The 5-foot king snake attacked the other snakes. The senators scrambled for safety as the reptiles did battle. Nothing could separate the 6 Roosevelt children from their beloved pets. When Archie was sick in bed with the measles, his brothers knew how to cheer him up. They sneaked his calico pony, Algonquin, into the White House elevator up to Archie's bedroom. There was just one problem. Algonquin was a vain little pony, and there was a mirror in the elevator. The pony fell in love with his own reflection, so the boys had a hard time pulling him out. No pet was turned away from the Roosevelt Zoo. including a one-legged rooster. Wilder pets such as a lion, a hyena, 5 bears, and a zebra were sent to live at their summer White House in Oyster Bay, Long Island. You know, I can't help thinking, having lived in the White House, how horrible that would have been
Yeah.
for the people who lived there. I'm sure they weren't all housebroken, to put it mildly.
Messy.
Okay, the most pampered pet. Calvin Coolidge was president during the prosperous 1920s. It was called the Roaring Twenties because many Americans enjoyed a wild and extravagant lifestyle. Coolidge was not a man of his time. Nicknamed Silent Cal, he had a quiet way of governing the country. However, he had no trouble communicating with animals. One Thanksgiving, the Coolidge family received a raccoon intended for their dinner table. Ooh. President Coolidge took one look into her shiny brown eyes and named her Rebecca. Rebecca and the president became fast friends. He built a special house outside the Oval Office. During the day, she waddled up and down the White House halls. She liked to unscrew light bulbs and unpot palms. Most nights, the president could be found walking his bushy-tailed pet on a leash. When the White House was being repaired, the president's family had to move out. Poor Rebecca was left behind. The president worried about his people-loving pet and took action. He ordered the presidential limousine to pick up Rebecca and return her to the Coolidge family. After all, she was the first raccoon. Rebecca was not Coolidge's only wacky pet. There were 2 white collies. Rob Roy was the president's dog. Mrs. Coolidge's favorite was Prudence Prim. The First Lady liked to sew matching floppy hats that she and her pooch would wear to White House garden parties. Mrs. Coolidge hated to see any pets caged, including her flock of birds. Unfortunately, a big myna bird's favorite perch was on top of the maid's head while she did her housework. This would never have happened, I'm afraid, in our White House. The best-selling pet. George Herbert Walker Bush's inauguration in 1989 marked the 200th anniversary of the U.S. presidency. There had been many dramatic changes since our first president was in office. During Bush's term, Americans saw the collapse of Soviet communism. The late 20th century was also a glorious time for White House pets. President Bush's Springer Spaniel, Millie, was voted the ugliest dog in the Capitol by Washingtonian magazine. Millie wasn't going to let sleeping dogs lie. She put paw to paper and set the story straight about her life in the White House. Millie dictated 141 pages of her best-selling doggo biography to former First Lady Barbara Bush. In it, the famous first dog recalls her heavy White House schedule. She also describes sitting in on morning briefings, chasing squirrels, and playing in the White House flower beds. Not one to let fame go to her head, she didn't neglect her duties as first dog. She mothered 6 puppies while in office. The president was grateful to Millie. The published pooch had given practically all of her first year's royalties, almost $900,000, to the First Lady's favorite charity, the Barbara Bush Foundation for Family Literacy. Still, President Bush was a little jealous that the media hound got so much attention. In Millie's book, The Spaniel writes, "I overheard the Bushes talking the other night. Some discussion about me keeping a lower profile. Every first pet knows when to let the president be top dog." Now, is this time for the reading, or?
Yes, as a matter of fact, let's show our appreciation to Mrs. Bush for reading to us this morning.
Wonderful book.
Oh, I love the way you read it.
At this time, You are correct. We do have a question and answer session, and we have some representatives locally that will start. We will start with a question from a representative from Oakwood Intermediate School with the College Station ISD.
Hello, Mrs. Bush. I'm William Hughes. I'm from Oakwood Intermediate School. I am on the Grizzly team. I was wondering, what were your favorite books when you were a child?
That's such a good question. And when I was a child, like fifth grade, I loved the Bobbsey twins. I may have been a little bit, that's about the age, I guess. I loved all the books about Lassie, the dog, by Albert Pacer Terhune, and I love books about animals. Mm-hmm. Thank you for asking, William.
And now, we have a representative from Henderson Elementary School in the Bryan ISD.
Hello, Mrs. Bush. My name is Brianna May, and I am a fifth grader at Henderson Elementary School in Bryan. My librarian is Mrs. Foley, and Mrs. Cox is my teacher. My question is, what was one of your happiest times in the White House?
I think the White House was a very happy place to live if you didn't think about wars and those awful things. But the happiest thing was I had a lot of children who are grandchildren who lived near the White House. So I would hear their little voices, and I'd hear the roller skates or the bicycles or the swimming, and that would be very, very happy. I also was happy when I could, anything a first lady does causes attraction. So if I could go to a homeless shelter, or I could go to, I particularly remember AIDS babies. I mean, that made me very happy because it helped them, and it helped the homeless shelter or the food bank. I loved those things. So maybe that was my happiest time. Mm-hmm. I also loved having my husband right across where I could see him working, and I could have lunch with him almost every day.
Thank you. All right. Now it is a really special time because we will go across Texas visiting schools from 17 regional education service centers located statewide. There are over 11,000 public school students participating at this very moment. And to those just joining us via teleconference, we welcome you to the George Bush Presidential Library Center. And right now, we'd like to give you guys a greeting all across the state of Texas from all of us that are here in the auditorium. We're going to give you a big howdy in 1, 2, 3.
Howdy!
That's how we talk down here. And they'd say howdy back. This is amazing. All right, we're going to now have some questions from some of the many schools that are joining us live. First, from Region 4. Good morning to the Pasadena ISD and South Shaver Elementary School. Please direct your question to Mrs. Bush.
Good morning, Ms. Bush. My name is Aisha Bush. I am a second grader at South Shaver Elementary in Pasadena, Texas.
There we are.
My question is, how are you feeling since your surgery, and what did you read while you were in the hospital?
The question was, how am I feeling? I feel wonderful. I'm particularly excited this morning, but I feel physically very well. And the question was, what did I read?
Well, you were in the hospital.
Well, I was in the hospital. Well, I read a biography about written by a very dear friend of mine called Bob Mossbacher. And I did read that, all 600 pages of it, or whatever it was. I really enjoyed it. But I also read a book by Maeve Binchy, an Irish writer, who I am very, very fond of. So I enjoyed reading that a lot. But I read a lot. And my son Neil gave me a Kindle, so I have 4 or 5 books on it right now that I can read. That's fun. Thank you for asking. You look very pretty today.
Nice. All right, we will now go to Region 8, Paris Independent School District and Aiken Elementary School.
Isn't that cute?
Darling.
Okay. What a great looking school.
Yeah.
I am a second grader at Aiken Elementary School in Harris, Texas. My librarian is Mrs. Henry and Mrs. Curry in My question is, what is your favorite genre or type of book to read?
What is my favorite genre or
Genre.
Genre or type of book to read?
I'm sort of eclectic. I like mysteries very much. I think they're fun. But I also like happy books. I like biographies. I just like everything because I really read a lot. And if a friend will say to me, "Oh, you ought to read Stephen Carter's new book, you'll love it." So I put it on my Kindle and I'm going to read it. I don't know what it's about yet, but I'm going to read it because a friend told me it was good. But I like to read many different types of things. I don't like to read how-to books, you know, how to bake a cake or how to make yourself better. At 83, if I don't know it now, I'll never know it.
All right, thank you. Let's go to Region 6 now. We'll now go to Region 6, not too far from here, Buffalo Independent School District and Buffalo Elementary School. Please direct your question to Mrs. Bush. Luckily, we have the question for you, Mrs. Bush, that they submitted in advance. And the question that was just asked from there was it hard for you to learn to read? And why do you think it is important for students to learn to read?
Well, I was very, very lucky. And my father was in the publishing business, and my mother was a very bright woman. And it was not hard for me to learn to read because my family were all readers, and they read to me, and it sort of just came by osmosis in our family. You read. And what was the other half of that question?
Other half was, why do you think it's important for students to learn to read?
I think it's the difference between being a happy life and an unhappy life. I think truthfully, if you can't read, there's so many things you can't do. Jobs you can't have, books you can't read, resumes you can't fill out, medicine bottles you can't read. It's just everything, but it really is the difference between a happy life and an unhappy life. And don't ever think it's too late to learn, but work as hard as you can, and you will have a wonderful life. You can take trips on books.
All right, thank you.
You should be answering these questions.
All right, we'll go to Region 5 now. Region 5, Little Cypress, Mauriceville Consolidated School District, and Little Cypress Intermediate School.
Hello, Miss Bush. My name is Christian Fiesler. I am from Cypress Martin Intermediate. My librarian is Miss Bonin, and my teachers are Miss Reynolds and Miss Stevenson. This is my question. Who was your favorite teacher and why?
Who was my favorite teacher and why? That's a very hard question when you're 84 almost to remember your favorite teacher. But I think my favorite teacher was my math teacher when I was in 11th grade at school. I don't know why Miss Boyden was my favorite teacher. She just made math interesting, and I could do it, for starters. That was very good. But I enjoyed her a lot. She had a good sense of humor, and she cared whether I did well or not. That made a big difference to me.
All right, thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Now we'll go to Region 11 and the Alvarado Independent School District up near Fort Worth. Alvarado Elementary South. Please direct your question to Mrs. Bush.
She's on the right.
Librarian is Miss Ramirez, and My question is, when you were a little girl, what was your favorite thing about school?
Question was, when you were a little girl, what was your favorite thing about school?
When I was a little girl, what was my favorite thing about school? Well, of course, like all little girls, I loved recess, but I loved the school I went to. Once a year, made you stand up in front of the whole school and recite a poem. And you worked very, very hard, and you got graded on how well you memorized it. It had to be long, and I liked it best because I would watch my friends do terribly dumb things, and that was fun. And of course, I was brilliant with the, I wasn't, but I struggled through my poem too. I remember I memorized bells one year. It went on forever. But my family got so tired of me struggling through bells at home. But I can still do a little. Hear the bells, silver bells, hear their tinkles. I can do a little bit of the silver bells too. But anyway, I enjoyed that. I loved literacy. I loved the reading time. We didn't have social studies then. We did different, called them different names. Thank you for asking that question.
All right. And now to Region 1, Zapata Independent School District and Zapata South Elementary.
What little faces, so cute.
I know.
Thank you. Hi, Mrs. Bush.
Hi.
My name is Margaret Gutierrez. I'm a fourth grader at school, and my librarian is Mrs. Bigler, and my teacher is Mrs. Garcia. My question for you today is, how did you and President Bush meet?
How did President Bush and I meet? We met at a dance many, many years ago. And he asked a boy who was standing on the sidelines, do you know the lady in the green and red dress, the girl? I was 16. And he said, oh, I do. I go to school with her. And or went to school with her. So he introduced me to George Bush. And George asked me to dance. And then you won't believe this. The music they played was a waltz. And George said, oh, I'm so sorry, I don't know how to waltz. Do you mind if we sit down and just talk? And since he was the handsomest boy I ever laid my eyes on, I was thrilled to sit down and talk. And that's how I met him at a dance.
Very nice. Now we go to Region 13, the Texas School for the Deaf.
Good morning, Mrs. Bush. Our students are going to speak to you through the interpreter here.
My name is Paige. I'm in first grade,
Oh, look at
and I'm from Texas School for the Deaf. What is your best memory when you lived in the White House?
Oh, that's such a nice question. For a first grader, that's pretty
Yeah.
grown up. My best memory in the White House, I'm assuming you mean sort of statewide memory. I think my best memory was when Lech Walesa of Poland came to the White House, and his country had just been made a democracy, and he was president, and we had a big reception for him, and he kissed the ground because he was so glad to be in a democracy. And then we had a lot of big labor people at that reception because they'd helped him get freedom. And one of the big men sat on the dining room table and broke it, this huge table. And that was, first of all, the White House staff picked it up quickly and propped it up. And the man went right out the front door. We never saw him again, and the table went out later. We didn't see it for 4 months. But that was a happy moment to see that man celebrate being in a democracy. Never thought it would happen. Tears ran down his face. Tears ran down our face, too. Thank you for asking.
Let's go back now to Region 1, Mercedes Independent School District in Ruben Hinojosa Elementary. Please direct your question to Mrs. Bush.
Oh, they're so sweet.
Good morning, Mrs. Bush. My name is Chanel Testera, and I am a fourth grader at Ruben Hinojosa Elementary in Mercedes, Texas. My librarian is Mrs. Testera, and my teacher is Mrs. Martinez. My question is, did Millie ever get into trouble with the president?
Oh, your question is, did Millie ever get in trouble with the president?
Yes.
That's correct.
The answer is with everybody. Because Millie, when she was having the babies, we didn't know she was having babies at that moment. We hoped she was. Just as we had the head of the diplomatic corps come up to the White House to greet us before we took them down to the big ball, all in fancy evening clothes. Why, the wife leaned down to pat Millie, and she threw up.
No.
She missed the wife, but we rushed the wife away and rushed poor Millie downstairs, but she had morning sickness at night.
Oh. Okay.
Thank you for your question. Ruben Hinojosa School.
All right, we're going to go to Region 16. It depends on what part of the country you're from, how you pronounce Miami or Miami. But it is Miami Independent School District and the Miami District Campus from Region 16. Please direct your question to Mrs. Bush.
Hello, Mrs. Bush. My name is AJ Mitchell, and I'm a fifth grader at Miami Elementary, Miami, Texas. My librarian is Mrs. Manor, and Mrs. Christmas is my teacher. My question is, who is the most important, interesting person you have met?
That's a very good question, and you asked it very well, too. The most important person, or interesting person, I'd say, because I certainly was lucky enough to meet all heads of state. But I guess President Sadat of Egypt, he just had a very special, just when you talked to him, you felt you were talking to someone who was almost see-through. It's hard to explain, but he was translucent. He knew all about the world, and he was very good man. I really think he never had a bad thought, and his only thought was how to make the world better. And I think he'd be very disappointed if he saw what's happening with the terrorists now. But I found him a very special man. I remember sitting, listening to him talk to George one time, and they went around the world talking about the world's problems, and he was just a very spiritual man, and I enjoyed him enormously. Thank you for that question.
I'm going to try to go to Region 9 now. We understand they're having a bit of technical problems at Wichita Falls Independent School District and Cunningham Elementary School. We'll try to get their question on. If not, they may be able to hear you. We'll ask it for them. So let's try to go to Wichita Falls now for their question at Cunningham Elementary School. Wichita Falls.
Your question was, what was my favorite room in the White House? That's a very good question. There you are. Good. But my favorite room in the White House was upstairs, and it used to be called the President's bedroom, but it's now next to the President and the First Lady's bedroom, and we had our own furniture in there, needlepoint rug I made, and couches and things that belonged to us. And we would go in there every night and talk and visit and have our guests come up. It was a very pretty room. And we did jigsaw puzzles in there. We did things that other people do in their own homes. We watched television. That was my favorite room, I think. It was there I sat and watched the first, with Billy Graham and George. No, not George, he was in the Oval Office, but we watched the first bombing of Iraq when they were fighting against, to get the Iraqians out of Kuwait. And we were there that night. And the room was very special. There's a lot of memories in it, good and bad. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. All right, to Region 14 now, in the Gorman Independent School District, Maxfield Elementary School in Gorman. We're ready for your question for Mrs. Bush.
Hello, Miss Bush. My name is Lauren Underwood. I am a second grader at Maxfield Elementary School in Gorman, Texas. My librarian is Miss Cole and my teacher, and Miss Vaughn is my teacher. My question is, where do you keep your pets at the White House?
Your good question. Where do you keep your pets at the White House? Any place they want to be. The pets, I hate to tell you this, but that then and now sleep in our bed with us. It's better now because we have a little dog, so it's not quite so crowded. But then they, on their own, when they got older, would move off to a couch. All the things you teach dogs not to do, our dogs did. I mean, they got on the furniture, but they had the run of the upstairs at the White House. Now, Ranger, my husband's dog, just was every place in the White House. And he got fatter and fatter, and finally the president put a sign around his neck that said, "Do not feed this dog." And we discovered one day he came up and he had some Juilliard ham. Is that what you call it? It's cut.
Julienne ham.
Julienne ham, just right on his chin. We realized he'd been in the kitchen downstairs.
Oh,
And he'd
no.
gotten on the trays that were low and just helped himself to a little salad. So we then had to bar him from the kitchen, too. But he got thinner again.
Thanks for your question.
He's very articulate for a second grader. Very, very.
Region 7 is the Mineola Independent School District and Mineola Primary School. We're ready for your question for Mrs. Bush.
Hello, Mrs. Bush. My name is Cook. Hello, Mrs. Bush. My name is Emily Cook. I'm a second grader at Mineola Primary, and Mrs. Lisa Bryan is my teacher. My question is, where was your favorite place to travel when you went to other countries and why?
What was the something?
The favorite place to travel when you went to other countries and why?
Well, I suspect my favorite place to travel was China, because we lived there for 14 months, and the country was growing so quickly and evolving so quickly from tight communism to really free enterprise. And I loved going there, and I loved seeing my Chinese friends. And then I loved seeing how the country was growing. So that was fun. But I enjoyed going almost every place. They were so exciting and wonderful. I loved going to Africa and Asia and Europe and South America. I'm about the luckiest woman in the world. I got to do all those things.
All right. Thanks for your question. Now we'll head on to
They're
Region...
wiggle worms. Look at them.
Yeah. Now we'll head on to Region 20 and the Harlandale Independent School District, Carroll Bell Elementary School in San Antonio. Region 20, we're ready for your question.
I'm making third grade at Carroll Elementary in San Antonio, and Ms. Rivas is my teacher. My question is, what was it like to be the president's mom?
Oh, that's a good question. What is it like to be the what was it like to be the president's mom? Well, a little nerve-wracking because people said bad things about my beautiful boy. But I guess I knew that that was going to happen. It happens to every president. And if it's your son, it really hurts. And my husband really didn't like it at all. It hurt him. And so many times the press is unfair to the president. And every now and then when I would be critical of somebody who was on the other side, George would say, my husband would say, now remember, it isn't always true what they say. The same thing holds for Democrats as Republicans. So you just have to judge a president by his actions, not by what other people say. So it wasn't easy, but I was so proud of him. I'm still proud of him. And so is his father. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. Back to Region 1 we go in Mission Consolidated Independent School District and Leal Elementary School. We're ready for your question for Mrs. Bush.
I'm a student at Yale Elementary, Mission CISD. My librarian is Mrs. Hart, and my teacher is Ms. Solis. My question is, do you still have pets at home?
Your question is, do I still have kids at home?
Pets.
Pets.
One and the same, maybe.
Yeah, yes, I do, and I wish I'd brought her, but she's a wiggle worm. And I have a little pet about so big because I'm not young enough now to chase a big dog or to have one pull me on a leash. So I have a little dog named BB, and she's a multi-poo. My husband calls her a fur ball. She's a little soft fur ball thing. She's not a lap dog. Maybe she'll grow into being one, but right now she's a wild man. And the reason I'm wearing gold shoes is that my shoes that matched my clothes, she ate up. So don't laugh, that's not funny. She had my glasses the other day. She eats everything that's loose, and we've become much neater because we're picking up our clothes now.
Good. All right, thanks for your question. We now go to Region 10 in the Dallas Independent School District, Jerry Junkins Elementary School in Carrollton. We're ready for your question for Mrs. Bush.
Hello, Ms. Bush. My name is Ella Rodriguez. I work at Fairfield School in Dallas, Texas. My librarian is Ms. Wilkinson, and my teacher is Ms. Langbaum. My question is, do you have one specific motto to live by? If so, what is it and how has it made a difference in your life?
That's a very good question. And I don't have one specific motto to live by, but I think never do anything that you'll be ashamed of. Always do what you think is right, and listen to other people. Give credit to other people. I'm trying to think of the things that my husband does, and as I think he's the perfect man, he's a perfect person for me to quote, but he does those things. He does what he thinks is right. He cares about other people. He gives credit to other people, and he listens. I wish I could listen more. I talk too much.
Thank you for your question.
Great question.
All right, we'll go now to Region 10 in the McKinney Independent School District, up just north of Dallas, and Finch Elementary School. We're ready for your question.
Hello, Ms. Bush. My name is Camila Garcia. I am a fourth grader at Finch Elementary in McKinney, Texas. My librarian is Ms. Strawbers, and Ms. Mastroianni is my teacher. My question is, what was the hardest thing about writing your stories, and what advice can you give to young writers?
Well, my book wasn't too hard to write because I kept a diary. And I would recommend everybody keep a diary. It doesn't have to be every day, but when something fun happens or something that moves you, that makes you feel good happens, then I would write them down. And I would write about things that my children or grandchildren did or my friends did or funny things. I must say, I enjoy life a lot, so I would write down the funny things. I still keep sort of a diary. Instead of a diary, I write a monthly letter to some friends my age who I don't see at all, that were in the Congress with George in I've forgotten when that was, but maybe 70-something. I still write them once a month, so now it's become my diary, really. But I write them the fun things and the moving things that happen. And I would recommend you all keep a diary, and I would recommend that no parents read it.
Yes.
All right. Now we go down to Region 2 for Toloso Midway Independent School District and Toloso Intermediate School in Corpus Christi. We're ready for your question.
Hello, my name is Maggie Keith-Lemian, 3rd grade at Toloso Midway Intermediate School at Corpus Christi, Texas. My question is, what advice do you have for Miss Obama?
What advice do I have for?
For Mrs. Obama.
Oh, for Mrs. Obama. That's a very good question. I don't think she needs much advice. She's a very bright, well-educated woman, and it seems to me that she's getting a good start as being First Lady. I don't even think I have to remind her to put her children first. I think she does that. I think she's a very good woman and will do a very good job. I love the way she's going to schools and doing things. I don't think she needs advice. I think she's a very intelligent, bright woman and is doing so many good things right now.
All right.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you. On to Region 12 and the Kearns Independent School District, Kearns Elementary School. We're ready for your question.
Hello, Mrs. Bush. My name is Brooke Quinn. I'm a 4th grader at Kearns Elementary School in Kearns, Texas. My librarian's name is Miss McMillan and my teacher is Miss Hammer. Here's my question. I'm 10 years old. What advice do you have for me if I become president someday?
Well, I hope you do become president someday. And my advice to you is the same advice I'd give any girl or any man, boy, which is to do what you think is right. You surround yourself with good people, you get their advice, and then you have to make up your mind what is right and stick with it. And so that would be my advice, is to do what you think is right. After hearing other people, listen to other people, and then do what's right in your mind. That's all you can do.
All right. Thank you. Our last stop on this tour of Texas takes us to Region 15 and San Felipe Del Rio Independent School District and Garfield Elementary School in Del Rio. We're ready for your question.
Amazing.
Hello, Ms. Barbara Bush. From all of us in Del Rio, Texas, and representing Region 15, my name is Bessie Alonso. I'm a 5th grade student at Garfield Elementary School. My teacher is Miss Amaya. Our question is, why do you love reading so much?
That's a good question. Why do I love reading so much? Well, because first of all, it teaches me about the world. I read the newspapers in the morning, and I love getting out of sort of any stress by reading a book. And I learn a lot. These days I forget a lot, sad to say, but I do learn a lot. And it just gives me a joy, just a big joy to learn to read. And I wish I could tell everybody how crucially important it is to read and to listen and to read again. I mean, it's just everything. It makes all the difference. We're going to be a stronger country when you learn to read, and we're going to depend upon all of you because you're going to be the leaders in our country. So read, read, read. Thank you.
Thank you. I just have to drop in a thought here, Mrs. Bush, and to Ms. Davis as well. These boys and girls, it takes a lot to stand up and do that in front of a crowd like that, and they're to be commended. This has been a fascinating session with the question and answers, and I think we need to show these kids that stepped up to the plate a round of applause and appreciation for the job they did.
It went very well.
Very nice. As we mentioned, the author of Wackiest White House Pets is Gibbs Davis, and she's with us today. Ms. Davis, just give us a few thoughts on Reading Buddies and then introduce the Reading Buddies that we have joined us on stage today.
I'd be happy to do that. I am so excited to be here in Texas to help celebrate the joy of reading with all of you, with Mrs. Bush. I love reading. I love reading for so many different reasons because you never have to be alone when you have a book. When you have a book, you have a companion or a friend. And a book can take you anywhere. I love reading books on different subjects, on going into outer space, or what it might be like living on a riverboat, or historical figures, or a boy wizard, anything. I really do. Even though, a little secret, I'm a very, very slow reader. But it doesn't make any difference that I'm a slow reader. I've always enjoyed it. And like anything else that you can share with a buddy, with a friend, with a grandparent, or a sister, brother, neighbor, it's just much more fun when you can share anything with a friend or a buddy. Now, I am the youngest in my family, and so I had 2 sisters and a brother, mother, father, everything. But lots of times I'd go up to them and I'd say, let's read a book or something. They'd be busy. Now, that's my first advice, to try and see if you can find a reading buddy either within your own home, or a neighbor, or a grandparent, or a friend. But if you can't, you don't stop there. I actually would line up my stuffed animals and I would read to my stuffed animals. And it sounds funny, but it made me feel so smart and so confident. I could relax. I didn't have to worry if I goofed up a word or whatever. And I also got to really ham it up. It made the story come alive when you use different voices. If you're reading The Wizard of Oz, The Tin Man, The Cowardly Lion, The Scarecrow, they all have very different voices. So you can be up here like this or down there like that, and you can just ham it up and have fun. You can pretend you're like an actor or an actress or something like that, whether it's with a friend or to a stuffed animal or whatever it is. I also, because I love animals, I mentioned this once before, I spend part of my time in New York City, and I happened to go into the library there, and I saw something on the wall. People were signing up for a Reading with Rover program, and it had a picture of a big dog, and I thought, what's that about? Well, they actually would bring dogs into the library, and children would sign up to read to the dogs. And generally speaking, it would be kids who were maybe a little shy, or they didn't feel very confident about reading in front of their class or their teacher or even to another friend. But they found for an absolute fact that when they would sit down with this dog and start reading a book to the dog, the reading would be better, they'd be calmer, they'd be happier, they'd be more confident. So reading to a pet isn't a bad idea either. And whether it's your pet, I don't know, you might have a cat or a dog or a fish or a snake or a mouse or whatever it is, but if you don't, and I didn't have a pet for a long time, I begged my parents to get me a dog, and they were so unfair and they wouldn't give me one. So I basically adopted my next door neighbor's dog. And I would go over there and brush its fur. It was a big St. Bernard named Boozer, and of course they loved it because I would brush all this fur and buckets of fur. And I would read to Boozer. And Boozer was the best listener, and he would look at me, and his little tail would wag, and he just made me feel like I was the best reader in the world. Anyway, so there are just many ways that you can read with a buddy. It can be a friend, a relative, somebody who's 5 or 95. It can be a stuffed animal. It can be a pet. And you can read outside, inside, in a car, in a bus, lying down on the floor, curled up in a chair. I love it. And it's free. And that's a biggie. You don't need any fancy sneakers that light up when you walk. You don't need expensive computer equipment. You don't need expensive athletic equipment. And you can be popular or shy, athletic or klutzy, pretty or not so pretty. You can, whatever, it doesn't matter. So anyway, reading is a great thing to fall back on your whole life. But don't wait for an adult to come to you with a book. I think many times children will wait for a teacher or a parent or an adult to come to you and say, let's read a book, or I'll read this book to you. Pick up, do it now. Pick up a book that's your favorite book, or find something on a really fun subject that really turns you on. It can be skateboarding, whatever it is. And take it to a grandparent or a friend or a pet and start reading. You start it. Just do it now. Just pick up a book and do it. So anyway, now we're going to see some of this Reading Buddies program in action here on the stage. We have students from Henderson Elementary and Oakwood Intermediate, and we're going to start with Henderson Elementary. They're going to read, by the way, from Millie's book, which is one of my favorite books, written by Millie, Springer Spaniel, as told to Mrs. Bush.
Our life at the White House is pretty heavily scheduled. The alarm goes off at 6 a.m. The press says that I go off a few minutes earlier by shaking my ears pretty hard in their faces. In any case, Barr jumps up, throws on her clothes, and races down 3 flights of stairs. Or takes the elevator when she feels a little tired. She usually feels tired. She walks me around the South Lawn Drive, brings me back in, feeds me, and climbs back into bed to read the papers with the pres and drink coffee and juice. Between 7 and 7:08, the president and I go off to the Oval Office. I often sit in on the morning briefings.
I sometimes want to go out and hunt for squirrels. I sometimes want to come in to take a break. The press says he gets pretty tired of letting me in and out.
Very good. Stand close to the mic.
One of the Washington newspapers had a puppy watch giving a daily report on my condition. I had a needlepoint chin cushion and waited like patience on a monument. One day, early in March, Barr and I went out to our dear friend Esther and Dick Moore's house for lunch. They surprised us with the puppy shower. The Moores knew something we didn't, for there were 6 of everything in the basket.
I spent days waiting and waiting and waiting. Finally, on March 17 and 18, my pups were born, and I did have them in the proposed nest, although I would have preferred a Bush's bed. Incidentally, my bed had a presidential C on it. Theirs does not. The babies grew and grew. As the weather got better, they spent hours on the south lawn playing and sleeping. We carried them down in a great plastic toy bag.
George, doggone it, the president took every opportunity to visit the pups. He brought out delegations of people who visit him. Sometimes he just snuck out alone. Sometimes he played with the pups. Sometimes the pups were let out for big runs on the lawn. They liked it that so much that sometimes we had to carry them back in. I kept my eyes on them.
Wednesday in May, 2 of the pups stopped off in the china room on the ground floor to be dried off. They'd been playing on the wet grass. They came upstairs and told me that they'd seen the most beautiful white dog in the room where samples of china used by the 40 previous presidents are displayed. A week or so later, I thought I might just take a peek. Those silly pups, they'd seen Rob Roy, Calvin Coolidge's famous white collie, in a portrait, not in the flesh. That did give me an idea. All the First Ladies have their portraits painted to be hung in the Grand Hall on the ground floor and adjacent rooms. This one is a portrait of Grace Coolidge done by Howard Chandler Christie. Dare I hope that Bar would consider having me in her portrait?
A secret or little-known fact about the White House is that other than the two well-known gardens, the Rose Garden by the Oval Office, where so many official ceremonies are held, and the First Lady's Garden, where Bar has teas, there are two hidden secret gardens. The one I like best is the Children's Garden, given as a Christmas present to the White House by President and Miss Lyndon Johnson. This sweet garden has a tiny little water lily pond, and the names and hand and footprints of the White House grandchildren in bronze are carefully set into the flagstones. Needless to say, the Bushes have the most grandchildren in the garden.
I believe the president's favorite room in the White House is his upstairs office. There's a painting that hangs on the wall of my office in the White House, and it pictures President Abraham Lincoln and his generals meeting at the end of a war that remains the bloodiest in the history of my country. Outside, at the moment, a battle rages in this picture, and yet what we see in the distance is a rainbow, a symbol of hope, of a passing of the storm. This painting is called The Peacemakers. For me, it is a constant reminder that our struggle, the struggle for peace, is a struggle blessed by hope. Many other paintings in the president's residence office are of the West, to remind him of his beloved Texas, and of the sea, to remind him of the rugged coast of Maine that he so loves.
Y'all did really good.
Let me just make one comment.
Yes, please.
You know, Millie really did want to be in the picture. And the artist who painted my painting to go in the White House felt that it wasn't appropriate. And 14 years later, when George was president, I hated the portrait. And so it was painted again as the mother of the president, not as the president's wife. And there's Millie in the painting, where she should have been.
Well, good for you.
You go to the White House, you'll see a 14-year older woman, but you will also see Millie where she should be. And I want to compliment you all on such good reading. It was wonderful. And
Wasn't it?
I'm so proud of you to get up and do that
Yeah.
so
All
well.
these
Thank you.
people.
Yeah, thank you. Finally today, Bobby Pennington is Youth Services Library at the Bryan Public Library and a talented musical storyteller. 2 years ago, Miss Pennington was a real hit as she sang a song she composed entitled Millie's Song. Please make welcome Bobby Pennington.
The library is free, and you ought to go to the library once a week and pick a book you want. It just would be a great thing to do if you go to the public library and take out books and then bring them back.
Yeah, I go to the library all the time. That's how I got my idea for writing this book, from books in the library. Anyway, so.
Well, Millie is my favorite White House pet, and I wrote this song just for her because she loves reading and writing. And also, we're going to have a statewide summer reading club in every library in Texas, all across Texas. So please come join the club this summer. And
Guess I didn't need to.
I'm going to sing the chorus twice, and I'm hoping you can sing the chorus with me every time it comes around. So the first time you can listen, and then you can sing it when you do it. I wish Millie would read to me, and I would read to Millie. I wish Millie would write to me, and I would write to Millie. When I go to the library, I check out a book fly, soar on wings, good books are my favorite things. Now we can sing the chorus. I wish Millie would read to me, and I would read to Millie. I wish Millie would write to me, and I would write to Millie. And let's do it again. I wish Millie would read to me, and I would read to Millie. I wish Millie would write to me, and I would write to Millie. Now I want you, if you're a student, I'd like you to turn to your teachers and go like this. That means thank you, because they helped you learn and help you learn to read. You owe them so much, and you're going to miss them this summer. So here's this verse about teachers. When my teacher sits in the story chair, I listen and forget my care. I dream of far lands with queens and kings. Good books are my favorite things. Can you sing this song with me, the chorus? I wish Millie would read to me, and I would read to Millie. I wish Millie would write to me, and I would write to Millie. Good job, thanks.
Thank you to Mrs. Bush, to Arthur Gibbs Davis, Bobby Pennington, all of our special guest readers, you in attendance here in the audience, and to the 11,000 plus for being our guests today here at the George Bush Presidential Library and Conference Center. Reading provides you with an exciting discovery adventure. We invite you to find a reading buddy and lead by example when you return to your schools and your classes today. Enjoy your time reading and take time to sing a little bit along the way. Please remain in your seats at this time until Mrs. Bush has left the auditorium. Your teachers will instruct you when to stand and when to leave. Have a wonderful day. Come see us anytime at the George Bush Presidential Library, and please remain seated.